John Lear, and the last time John Lear was on that radio program was 2007. So they've dragged up this story from over 7 years ago of a woman who claimed to work for NASA and who said that some of the Viking images had people in them. But it seems dubious to me, because this person describes moving images and also says that when the Viking craft was moving around the surface of Mars, well, in fact it wasn't, it was a stationary lander. So I'm very skeptical of this story, Douglas, but mainstream media have put this up strangely when we are putting out this research. One aspect that I particularly objected to in this article, it says conspiracy forums have been set ablaze this week after a lady claiming to be a former NASA employee said she had seen humans on Mars. Well, it is bullshit, because this call took place at least as long ago as 2007. So conspiracy forums have not been set ablaze this week. Some people may have been talking about it on the internet because they put it in Mail Online and in other mainstream publications. Certainly any person who read this article and thought there was at least some truth in it, that would then muddy the waters for this, because this does not mention the theory that the Mars rovers never left the Earth and the photographs are coming back from Earth. What it's saying is, hey, someone at NASA saw a person in one of the Viking images. That means there's a secret space program and people are walking around Mars. So it's not questioning for 1 minute the fact that Viking might not be on Mars, which is why it's disinfo, in my opinion.
The problem, I think, is that the Daily Mail have tried to attach that story to a really bizarre story about nuclear explosions on Mars. So they seem to try to lump her in with with a very bizarre story.
As I said, we'll come on to the Mars Society. Why does NASA need a separate organisation, completely separate, to run these Mars analog sites, where they're doing all of this research for the rovers and testing components and this kind of thing? But this Mars Society, it actually says on the internet that it's not a company. It is a not-for-profit organisation and is funded fully by American organisations, which I would imagine means NASA. So they've created this separate organisation called the Mars Society, which is running all of these Mars analog stations. So why do they need a separate organisation? And it's run by this guy, Dr. Robert Zubrin, founder of the Mars Society.
But yes, the Mars Society does pop up in all the right places to be orchestrating some kind of deception.
You know, we could comment on some of his lectures. Have you seen any of them, Andrew?
Not. I've heard him on Coast to Coast, but I've not seen his lectures, so no, I can't really comment on those.
Right. Well, Zubrin is sort of a proponent of manned Mars missions. So what he's campaigning for is to try and get the funding and the motivation to build rockets that can get to Mars, create some sort of little colony, and then get back safely. And he goes into all of the logistics as to how many spacecraft you'd need, the fact that you need to create artificial gravity on the way to Mars by spinning it round and creating gravity. So, but if you want my view on it, his lectures are just like a pipe dream.
I'm going to talk humans to Mars within a decade, okay? And I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think it would have to be done in that kind of time frame if you're going to do it. I'm going to talk at some length as to how I think it could be done. In fact, I'm going to show you 2 different ways it could be done. Humans to Mars within a decade, okay? Is that really possible? NASA's current, timeline is to do it around the year 2047. Mars Direct was actually conceived by a team led by me and another engineer named David Baker at Martin Marietta, which became Lockheed Martin, in 1990. This is the mission sequence chart for the Mars Direct plan. You can launch to Mars every 2 years, and we're going to be launching 2 boosters every 2 years to Mars in order to do this. Well, first of all, any space operation requires an appropriate launch vehicle. And we set ourselves the task of designing one in the Saturn V class out of available technology, shuttle technology. So you have 4 shuttle main engines, a couple of solids, the external tank core, hydrogen oxygen upper stage, and a 10-meter fairing, or 33 feet if you work at Lockheed Martin. And The, okay. And this could lift 120 tons to low Earth orbit. But more importantly, it could use this upper stage to send 47 tons on direct trans-Mars injection or 59 tons on trans-lunar injection. And that is how we wanted to do the mission. Just lift and throw and let it go. Send the payload to the planet with the same booster that launched it in the first place. That's how we've done every real unmanned planetary mission. That's how we did the real Apollo missions to the moon. No one's ever done a mission to anywhere by lifting things to the space station and waiting for the interplanetary cruiser to return from Saturn and be refitted to load the payload on it and then go back out. No, just lift and throw and let it go. And RV. And what this is a little rocket ship for returning from Mars to Earth in the terminal stage of the mission. But no one's in it when it goes out the first time. Or a crew of 4 for a 6-month voyage from Mars back to Earth, landing site number 3. So this is an actual photograph of the base. What you see here, here's the Earth return vehicle. There's the cabin, the 2 propulsion stages, the intakes for the chemical processing unit, which is built into the landing stage that acts as the takeoff pad for the rest of it. Here's the reactor and the crater in the background, the habitat, upper stage where they live, the upper deck where they live, lower deck is the garage for the little pressurized rover, a couple of solar panels, uses backup power if we have to turn the reactor off. You also have backup power by running the engine of the rover or the light truck, which may be hard to see, but it's sitting over here. It's an unpressurized vehicle, which is also the backup for this one. And then this thing here is an inflatable greenhouse. This is not a mission critical element. It's an experiment in learning how to grow crops on Mars in Martian soil, Martian sunlight, Martian gravity, Martian water for the benefit of future missions and future bases. Now, after a number of these missions have occurred in different places, you'll know where you want to develop a major base, and you could do that by landing a lot of the HABs in the same place and mating them up. These are second-generation HABs here who landing legs can articulate not only up and down, but also side to side.
Using rocket technology to get manned missions to Mars, I think I don't think they would achieve it with rockets. They need something more advanced. And I suspect that the whole ethos of what he's doing masks the secret space program, which we've covered in other
yes.
in other
yes. And I mean, when I read this Mars Society in your document, I was familiar with Zubrin, but I didn't really know. I just thought he was just like some space enthusiast. I did not know that they were directly involved with managing some of these sites, and that is very peculiar. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I'd add to that is that, again, what some people don't realise is that a lot of these Mars images have been through a private company before they get to the public. That's mm-hmm. Mammalian Space Science Systems, MSSS. Why are these images being released through a private company before they're available for public consumption? Mm-hmm. That's another huge question.
And Zubrin did work for Lockheed Martin, who develop secret aircraft, and I wasn't able to find out what he actually did when he worked for Lockheed Martin. I've picked out a quote from one of Zubrin's lectures where he says, "The idea that we cannot go to Mars until much more advanced propulsion systems that can get us to Mars in 30 days is not a valid argument, and I believe it is disingenuous as well." Now, I find that 30 days quote very interesting, because when I give my lecture about Ed Fouché's TR-3B, I suggested that they've already got the capability to get to Mars within 4 weeks. It's a very similar time period.
It is, isn't it?
So does Zubrin know something that he's not letting on? Because all of his lectures are based on rocket technology and nothing more advanced than that. So,
I mean, that brings also, I think there's another group called the Planetary Society, which also has, I think, a similar kind of language about space exploration in general. And I know that one of the people that's associated with that is Robert Picardo. So this is something I've got from Carl James, and he's been involved with people at JPL as well, Robert Picardo, and he played the holographic Doctor in Star Trek Voyager. So that's a connection worth looking into, and how that, I think we're sort of just touching on a whole sort of other area, how this perception management it operates, with these things like the Mars Society, the Planetary Society, which seem like these benign, organisations intended to promote interest in the space program, but they don't really. They'll poo-poo any any idea that there's secret stuff that's
Yeah.
that you know is
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Do you think this could be masking a secret space program?
Oh yeah, quite possibly. Yeah.
You actually think that physics changes as you get further away from Earth? So
That's right. I don't think they can get anyone beyond the Van Allen radiation belts.
Right. So for all you don't rule out the secret space program,
Oh yeah, there may well be.
think so?
Anti-gravity definitely exists. I've got Victor Schauberger's books somewhere. His work was sequestered by the Nazis right back in the 30s. I think they called it torsion physics,
Right.
which leads absolutely straight into your work on the TR3B.
Now, in the final section, I discuss what the reason might be. So let's say that the hypothesis is true, that they're faking all of these missions to Mars. One would imagine it's to conceal something which perhaps is on Mars, and I've listed what may be there. Evidence of past advanced civilizations, human or otherwise, inhabited man-made bases that have already been set up in secret spacecraft or spaceports, the fact that the planet's makeup might be significantly different to accepted scientific theory, and I think Douglas Gibson is of that mind.
The physics of Mars is probably completely different to Earth, and that's essentially what they're hiding, what they don't want us thinking about.
Right. Do you want to expand on that as to what you think it might be like on Mars?
Well, my background is, like you say, in theosophy. In the theosophical worldview, rather than consciousness evolving as a kind of peripherally around matter, matter has evolved from consciousness. That sounds like I'll be accused of being unscientific, but actually you can't prove either of those sets of assumptions.
Yeah.
It's just as valid to start from the that different standpoint.
Yeah. Let me share that with you then, Douglas, because I've not delved into a great deal into this thing called consciousness on which planet, and scientists will agree, or some scientists will agree, that in order to observe the universe, observe everything that there is, there must be consciousness, and that consciousness must be detached in some way or different in some way from physical matter or even space. So you have to have consciousness in order to experience the world, and this consciousness element is possibly vastly underplayed or even completely ignored in modern science. But what Douglas is saying is that consciousness is probably the most important of the two.
Yeah, consciousness itself is more fundamental than matter, in my opinion. The problem kind of goes back to the split between alchemy and science about 500 years ago. So science itself kind of grew out of alchemy. Newton himself started out as an alchemist. What seems to be forgotten along the way is that science itself can still be placed back within a larger alchemical context, if you like, which does indeed say that when you travel certain distances away from the Earth, all our physical constants start to change. The speed of light becomes different, which also ties in with Rupert Sheldrake's talk. Was it earlier this year?
There are other things that people have suggested whereby the non-physical element of humans, our soul, if you want to call it that, somehow resonates with the planet itself, and that by taking your physical body away from the Earth, you're disconnecting it from some kind of field, maybe a morphic field or the akashic field, and that you would lose your marbles if you travel more than, let's say, 1 million miles from the Earth.
Well, exactly. I mean, I try to avoid sort of terms like astral and try to use modern scientific terms, which you can do instead. But just what you were talking about just then in Nexus magazine in August, they had an article about the strange experiences of the Russian cosmonauts, experience exactly the things you've just been talking about, altered states of consciousness once you travel a certain distance from the Earth. So there's a change in your consciousness and in matter itself. So when you get to the Van Allen radiation belts, the radiation you're experiencing isn't it isn't really floating around in space, which is a kind of questionable concept in itself. It's actually radiation coming from the atoms of your own body, your own spaceship. It's the beginnings of this, I suppose I'd have to call it an alchemical change in the atoms of your body, but also in your consciousness as well. It's a change in the relationship between the two. It is very, very interesting. I mean, it's just a huge, it's a whole area of science that we're being very carefully
steered away from.
Exactly, and specifically by NASA.
And if it were true, it would turn everything on its head.
Absolutely.
You're saying that the cover-up in this is something quite profound and fundamental, rather than just the fact that there might be aliens on Mars.
Exactly.
You're saying it's something fundamental about the understanding of everything that is.
Absolutely. It's about the relationship between consciousness and matter, what they used to call alchemy, but which you can look at in absolutely strictly scientific modern ways. There's nothing unscientific or irrational about thinking about consciousness itself.
Right. Okay.
And it changes everything when you do.
What came first, consciousness or matter?
Exactly.
Have we got a situation where the rovers are really on Earth, but the orbiters are really going around Mars, or are the orbiters not going around Mars either? You know, and we're seeing some other images. That's a question I think that would need to be resolved. Or have they somehow managed to set things up such that, you know, we're going to end up arguing about the authenticity of all the images and call all the images into question? Because this is something we've seen that happen with 9/11 imagery as well, which, you know, we haven't got time to go into. But so the overall overarching thing, I think, is to cover up secret technology. That's so these rover programs have now become the equivalent of Apollo, in that a lot of good minds, you know, with highly skilled technical abilities, detailed technical knowledge, they're now soaked up into those sorts of programs, and they're not going to be sort of entertaining the idea of black programs, secret technologies, and this sort of thing. They're all helping unwittingly to keep all of that covered up. That it may just be that the rover program is all part of that perception management operation. That's quite possible.
It may well be that they put the rover on a rocket and then just crash it into the back of the moon, or you know, into the ocean, and then they're all being duped by images that are being sent back by some other covert team.
Right.
It's, I think, unless we have a completely independent citizen-based space program where Tom, Dick, and Harry can build their own craft and get it to Mars and then go and film their technology on Mars, I'm not going to believe it. Do you see what I mean? Independent verification.
And I mean, if we look at how difficult that is, I mean, if we take we talked a little bit about this, of the recent crash of the Virgin Spaceship 2 that broke up just after it was released from the plane. I mean, that's a kind of a civilian space program.
It's, I don't buy what happened there. To me, they're trying to put into the public's mind that anything above the Earth's atmosphere is really difficult, folks. There's no way civilians can manage it.
Right.
Whether Branson's in on that or not, I don't know. I've stuck my neck out and said I'm 75% sure. I think Andrew's right on the fence, but you're convinced.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I say, I only intend to spend an hour kind of dismissing the idea, and the whole subject. Every time I've looked, it's exactly the same as Apollo. Like I say, you take any aspect and try and get to the bottom of the science behind it, and pretty soon everything's falling apart in your hands.
And once you become convinced, do you feel annoyed about it?
Oh, I did initially. Yeah, I mean, you do. The same as with Apollo. This is one of the biggest problems. What's that famous saying? It's difficult to deceive people, but it's even harder to convince them that they have been deceived.
Yeah.
Because then, of course, their pride's involved.
Yeah.
So yes, when you try and broach a subject like this, people start getting angry.
Yeah. All right, but you've got over that.
Yeah. I've got over it.
You start. It comes to the point where you actually start to laugh at it. I did manage to get a photograph of the operators taken from behind their shoulders, and we'll just have a look at what they're looking at on the screen. Remember, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night.